Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Discussing a Murderer. This is Jeff Jones. With me today is the partial panel. We'll start from the bottom, and we'll welcome Dr. Silkman first. Welcome back, Dr. Silkman.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It's great to be here, and I'd like to say hi to all my fellow panel members and everyone in chat. Let's continue, guys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Silkman and Kellie. Welcome back and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be back, and hello, chat and panel members.
And last but certainly not least, Big Jeff. Welcome back and good evening.
Good evening is right, Jeff. Thank you very much. Good to be back amongst my friends on the panel. It is still cold. That hasn't changed from last week. And looking forward to some relief, hopefully on the horizon. But I'm sure the rest of this episode is going to get me steamed up. So let's go for it.
Around here, if someone's in their 20s, sexual relationships, boyfriends, whatever, how many, right. All those sorts of things, because it's when those are the things that can be emotional and trigger people to do bad things. So those are the areas that you want to concentrate in and look into those private parts of her life, intimate relations and so forth. And, she's sleeping with somebody's husband. I mean, that's a risk factor. All those things you have to really, really understand to move in the right direction, to make sure you're not get off in
and do families, like with victims of families
are emotional. I understand that. That's a delicate part, dealing with these are the vicarious victims, say in a homicide, or the family members and friends. And you have to deal with that artfully and compassionately with them, but you've got a job to do. And you've got to get in there and find out what was going on. Otherwise, you're doing a disservice to everybody, including the victim. So yes, everybody close to her, in contact with her, even remotely at the beginning, has to be looked at as a potential suspect until you can rule them out.
One of the things that we did was we created a chart of who did they get an alibi from. So if we start with, the married man who's getting a divorce, that she had the sexual relationship with, and then a friend of hers described that she wanted to break that off, but he kept calling her. He described it as they were still great friends. And then, of course, he provides information that she's had sexual relations with her roommate. Her roommate is best friends with her ex-boyfriend. So,
first of all, ex-boyfriends have to always be in the suspect pool.
The ex-boyfriend is never asked. He says at trial, he's very forthcoming. No, I was never asked to provide an alibi. The roommate was never asked to provide an alibi. And she goes missing on the 31st, but nobody reports that until the 3rd of November. So it isn't like when she doesn't come home the 31st, the 1st, the 2nd, that anybody's reporting it. It's her business colleague that finally calls the mother and says, I'm worried. So would that make you comfortable with eliminating them? Or
no, not at all. You can't eliminate anybody based on that. It's a lack of investigation. Each of those individuals have to be looked at as potential suspects.
Mark Wiegert, during Brendan Dassey's trial, said, the fact that they couldn't find any forensic evidence, he said they had 5 days to clean up, right? Now, isn't it amazing but if you look at this case from a purely investigative perspective, right? And I'm sure Kellie will back me up. You don't want anyone trouncing around the victim's house, right? Potentially to hide crime scene evidence, manipulate the potential crime scene, clean up, etc., etc. So it's rather interesting that both Ryan and Scott were never separated, were never kept out of the house. Her bedroom was not kept. Basically, people trampled in and out, and I think it was Ryan or Scott that was actually providing material to the investigators. Now, you have to admit, that's a rather strange thing to do when you're doing a proper investigation and you look at the inner circle of friends, right? So here you've got a roommate and an ex-boyfriend, and they were basically given carte blanche to do whatever they wanted in that property for days. Because remember, Teresa wasn't reported missing for a long period of time. To me, that's not proper procedure, right? I'm not sure what Kellie thinks, but that's not the right way to do things, is it?
No, you definitely expect them to do all that. Hearing all this again is just really refreshing, because it's everything that we've all kind of, understood, that this is what a good investigation should have done. So, yeah, Dr. Silkman, you absolutely just summarized it perfectly.
I mean, if you're doing an impartial investigation, right? Because the charge has been that the investigators had tunnel vision. Now, I understand that what Kellie said, that they looked at others, etc., etc. But when you look at the actual nucleus of where Teresa Hallbach lived, you have to admit the investigators were real remiss. They dropped the ball there, because we've got testimony. They spoke with Ryan and they spoke with Scott, right? And this beautifully sums it up. So I believe this is the interrogation of Ryan Hillegas. And the question was asked, I quote, "And during this entire missing person period, that is before the RAV4 was found, did the police ever ask you for any kind of alibi for October 31st? Answer, no. They never asked your whereabouts whatsoever? Answer, I don't believe so." And then they asked Scott, right? They said, question, so would it be fair to say that you weren't in any way treated like a suspect, that you could tell? Answer, that's correct. Oh, actually, I believe that's still Ryan Hillegas. So quite clearly, you can tell that I'm sure Ryan didn't even feel any pressure from the investigators nor Scott. They never separated them. They spoke to them together. I don't think that's really good investigative technique. Just an opinion, of course.
Yeah, I'm not sold on that one, Dr. Silkman. I'm totally with you. Not the best investigative technique.
Well, somebody did end up providing an alibi for Ryan, right? They went to Twitter and said that Ryan was eating dinner with his parents on the night of October 31st, which was debunked in about 40 seconds.
Correct.
And then he was with he had a girlfriend.
Right.
And also Big Jeff. Remember when Mr. Kratz did an interview, I think with the lady comedian, he goes, "Well, at least I had an alibi." This is the lead prosecutor saying, "I had an alibi." It's simply ridiculous.
We'll start with who is Teresa Hallbach and who was she in relationships with. And we checked out from her phone records and everything we could gather, her emails, everyone that she had contact with. And we did criminal background checks on them. And then we looked at potential alibis for that day, possible motives, the nature of the relationship, all of that we sorted through to refine it down to one person, two people that might meet the Denny standard. And at the top of my list was Ryan Hillegas. There was tension between them during the summer. She didn't even want to photograph a wedding that she knew he was going to be the best man in. They broke up in 2001, but Ryan was still coming over a lot, visiting, and Teresa even wrote in an email in October that she realized that Ryan was still interested in her, was still checking her out. It's clear to me that she's over Ryan, but Ryan still seems interested in her. And then after she's murdered, he's moved into her place and he's there where there's potentially evidence. I found that just unbelievable.
Is that more of that top-notch detective work that we were just talking about, guys?
Well, yeah. I mean, it really, to be honest, it's actually very embarrassing. And if any of you guys on the panel and in chat are following the Brian Hoberger case, and also the Alex Murdoch trial. Oh my God. The defense team, the SLED police force are being heavily criticized for not doing a proper and thorough investigation. Lord knows what those defense attorneys would have done to the MTSO, right? In terms of not also the MTSO, but the DOJ and the other investigators, because the amount of errors, mistakes, and omissions, the defense attorneys would have been asking the judge to throw the case out because it's so badly done, right? And so Kathleen Zellner simply cannot believe what transpired. I don't know whether this occurs in Wisconsin, but surely the investigators have to be following standard procedures, right? Even if you do it to show that you don't have any impartiality, you treat everyone equal. When the forensic evidence comes in, fine. But remember, at that stage, they did not know whose blood that belonged to in the RAV, right, guys? That wasn't known until November the 10th. So they should be treating everyone equally, in my opinion.
And then he's providing the most intimate details about her to the investigators.
When you say you talked to the police, who did you speak with?
Let's see. I know Thursday night when we were at the house, I went over after Scott called me. I went to the house and we kind of started calling around and calling friends then, but I believe it was Jerry Poggle and Detective Wiegert who were at the house Thursday night collecting belongings and asking questions. The family was there also.
And so did you tell Sheriff Poggle that you would sort of become the coordinator of all of this?
I don't believe so. I think it was just kind of assumed I was kind of the contact for the whole search. If anybody wanted to help, they were instructed to call me. Basically, it, I guess, started with me.
Did you at some point ever go to the property, the Avery property?
Yes.
When was that?
Jeez. When did we go there? Saturday, Sunday.
You know, I'm sorry. I just have to make the point that I find him to be extremely sketchy, and even beyond the sketchiness, to not have these details like kind of nailed down before you get onto a stand and you're ready to, you know, help convict the guy who murdered your best friend and ex-girlfriend, or one of your good friends and ex-girlfriend, and you can't exactly remember what these questions, you know, wouldn't you have this stuff ironed out a little bit before you get on the stand and you're going to be in front of a lot of people and they're going to be asking you these questions? Wouldn't you be a little prepared? He just, I can't remember. I can't.
Well, he's being deliberately sketchy, right? And I believe that's a good reason to do that, because you don't want the questioning attorneys to pin you down at a specific time and place. And that we all know what happened when he was asked, oh, what time did you see Teresa? Remember on the Sunday night? The guy couldn't remember whether it was night or during the day. And he knew that he could not afford to give a specific answer. Now, surely you can't remember when you went to see your friend, Scott, with your ex-girlfriend there at the computer. You can't remember whether it was nighttime or time. You don't want to be pinned down at a certain time, right? I'm sorry, guys, but I'm not saying Ryan did anything nefarious, but to me, that's a great concern, right? Especially when now, imagine if they subpoenaed his phone records to find out exactly where he was, who he was calling. Where was he? Was he at Teresa's place? Was he somewhere else? Who did he call? Who did he converse with? It's a golden opportunity lost, in my opinion.
And not only could he not remember what time of day or whether it was light or dark out, What he could remember was that he went over to drop something off for Scott. But do you think he could remember what that thing was?
I'm being cheeky here, but saying I dropped off some narcotics doesn't sound good, does it? Doesn't it, Jeff?
It doesn't. It doesn't sound good, and I'm sure you're not insinuating that that's what it was. But
no, pure speculation, and Jeff can cut it out of the podcast.
But yeah, this is his lack of memory is spectacular. He also has 20 some dropped calls on the 31st.
22.
Sorry, excuse me. On the 22 drop on the 4th. Yes, excuse me. Yeah, the day before the Bravos.
22 drop calls, but I'm not sure.
Couldn't remember who he was talking to, right?
That's
right. All these details, but those meaningful.
The interesting thing is that's exactly what Zona said when she was at the salvage yard. The cell reception was a little bit wonky, and they would frequently drop calls. But Jeff, I must read this. I must read it. He was asked in trial because it's relevant to this. He was asked, I'll quote it, and did the officers who let you in, because remember, he admitted going into the Avery salvage site, he goes, and did the officers who let you in know that you had a relationship as a former boyfriend with a missing woman at that point? And Ryan said, I don't know if anybody knew I was an ex-boyfriend of hers. I guess I never saw the relevance in it. I'll tell you can't make this stuff up.
I'm not real sure on the dates. It was possibly that Monday or Tuesday, which would have been the, let's see, 3rd. Is that the 6th or 7th that Monday?
Well, let me ask you this: when you went to the property, was it still to your knowledge, in the custody of the law enforcement?
Yes.
Did you pass through any checkpoints?
Yes.
And did the officers who let you in know that you had a relationship as a former boyfriend with the missing woman at that point?
I don't know if anybody knew I was an ex-boyfriend of hers. I guess I never saw the relevance in it. Or
did Sheriff Poggle know that?
What's that?
Did Sheriff?
He never saw the relevance in it, guys.
Only in Wisconsin can you get
that makes it perfectly okay.
That's not appropriate, right? Ryan Hillegas had an intimate relationship with Teresa Horbach, right? Clearly, I believe he was still interested in her. She wasn't really interested in him. Teresa Horbach, I believe, said to a friend or wrote it down that she avoided going to a wedding shoot because he was going to be there. So I'm not saying he did anything nasty, but surely you can't allow him to A, stay in the property where Teresa Horbach lived, and B, walk into a crime scene. Walk into a crime scene. That's crazy.
Yeah, he definitely should have been forthcoming with the past relationship. That's standard 101. Just general common sense, isn't it? Like, I guess he's trying to minimize the contact by just referring to them as good friends. And I don't know why. Does it make him a killer? If it doesn't, then why would you do it? Like, it's a bit of a fine line. As for the whole the idea of where she didn't go to a wedding because of him actually comes from Tom Pierce. So this is coming from Tom Pierce. Tom Pierce actually doesn't say it was Ryan, I don't believe. Oh, maybe he did. Hang on. I was trying to recap on what it is. But he just said something on the terms of that there was a wedding and that she didn't want to go to it because, it must have been him that he was going to be there. For a while there, I thought it might have been he might have got mixed up with Ryan and Bradley Checks because Bradley also did DJing at weddings. But he does, I believe at this stage, does mention Ryan by name to say that it was because of Ryan. She doesn't want to do the wedding. He definitely has a lot of duper's delight going on as well. And I know none of us are body experts, so it's a bit hard to kind of say that we can put that forward as being this is more based on opinion rather than like an interpretation from skill. But he definitely is coming across sketchy, and for the reasons, I have no idea. Oh, and for those drop calls, it's been alleged that the drop calls were all private and that they were actually forwarding calls from dispatch to him because everyone was ringing up to ask about, they were calling dispatch and like the law enforcement office to ask about the the public walk around the search party the next day. So they were just forwarding on those calls to Ryan. I believe he actually does have a bit of an alibi because there was like 16 people in Teresa Halbach's house at this stage, and they were all around planning on the maps of the direction and the route that they were going to take the following morning to start this search party. So just want to put that out there as well, just to bring the balance that it might not be as nefarious as what we could allude to, that it might have a bit of an explanation.
Did Sheriff Poggle know of your relationship with her?
At that time, I don't believe so. I think everybody just assumed I was a good friend.
He's got access to Teresa's personal possessions, to her residence, and then he's on the Avery property crossing the checkpoints on November 7th. The key, the sub key, is discovered on the 8th in Mr. Avery's bedroom. We think that there was a sub key at her house, and somebody who had access to her house gave that key to the police. We've made repeated efforts to talk to him, and we've told him the reason we want to talk to him is to rule him out. If he can give me plausible explanations for things, but he doesn't respond. And one of the most suspicious parts of the case is his story about the parking light on Teresa's vehicle. He told the police that he had talked to family and friends and had determined that Teresa had broken out the parking light before October 31st, made an insurance claim, taken a cash payout, but she kept the money and didn't get the car repaired.
I mean, we kind of have to address this. There's so much going on here. It doesn't sound like something Teresa Halbach would do, someone who cared for her car, someone who, was driving all the time. That's not a repair that you should go, and it's not like a ding in the side. It's not a dent that you can say, I don't care if there's a dent. I'd rather keep the $500. No, this is a light that a cop will pull you over for and say, hey, your fog light is out. This is not something to avoid in the insurance.
Well, the insurance themselves refute that story, right? So that story is that ship has sailed for that story. The insurance company denies it, so it can't possibly be true. So put that one to bed. That was a flat out lie. Why is he lying? I don't know. Any ideas?
No idea at all. But just a couple of important points here, guys. No one who remembered seeing Teresa Halbach's vehicle that day had mentioned a significant piece of damage like that. A broken blinker light, a damaged bumper, you would note that for sure. Everyone basically stated they spoke with Stephen Schmitz, and in a report he said, the vehicle looked very new. Furthermore, what I find particularly damning is that on the missing person report, where they describe her vehicle, they don't put any identification marks, i.e. look out for a vehicle that's got a broken blinker light. So my final point is the mere fact that the state don't want to give Kathleen Zahner that blinker light to do forensic testing, I believe is actually quite telling.
So that's interesting because that's elaborate. And over the years, what you notice is people who lie usually have real elaborate lies. So the first thing that I checked out was that parking light broken when she visited the appointments that day. Her client, Mr. Schmitz, said that the car looked new car is 6 years old. Our interpretation of that was he didn't see any damage. The car wasn't banged up or anything. So then we went back to the insurance company, and they said she never made a claim about the parking light. She made a claim about her windshield wiper, this little tiny expense, but she didn't make a claim about this really significant damage to the front of her vehicle.
It's just so. I'm sorry. I have to stop it because I want people out in chat and out there watching this to reasonably tell me that if this happened to your car, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I don't need that fog light, and just take the money. Like I'm sorry. Like I think the documentary does a really good service here to put this right in front of our faces and be like, so you're not going to claim that. You're just going to drive around with that, but yet again you claim a windshield wiper accident and get that whatever. How much could that cost? Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's quite ridiculous to even. So sorry to beat a dead horse there, but.
Well, Jay, you and I have talked about intellectual curiosity, right? When something happens and somebody makes a statement that is determined to be false, like for example, certain DAs saying that they spoke to parole officer. Shouldn't there be some intellectual curiosity to go back and question the provider of the false statement as to, can you take a second to recollect as to why you might have said this when it is patently determined to be false? What is that intellectual curiosity?
Who told you that? Right, Ryan, who told you that? Where did this source come from? Who was that? Was it her mom, her dad, the roommate? Where did you hear the story, and why did you guys all settle on that? And if you're interested in the truth and finding the truth, you would want to nail these things down. Well, right? At least in my mind.
You would 100% agree. But, there's a couple of issues here, and I would like Kellie to comment if possible, because, that photograph where Teresa's that legendary photograph where Teresa Horbach is standing in front of her very shiny RAV4, right? You can clearly see, I believe Tom Pierce said in court that he's the one that took that photograph, and a researcher by the name of Kaf, let's hope she's listening, she actually found out the place where that photograph was taken. So the question is, how long before her murder was that picture taken? Because that'll give a possible leeway in terms of time, a time frame of when that blinker light, because you can clearly see it in the picture, was not damaged to when it was damaged, right? Is it days? Is it months? Is it weeks? So it'd be very, very interesting when she had sustained that damage. And the reason why you don't want to ask any questions about the blinker light, I think it's pretty obvious, because it may lead to an alternative scenario in which her murder is actually related to the broken blinker light. Because if you have a broken blinker light, right, potentially you have to get out of the car, pick it up, and go towards the back of your car. And the evidence shows, I believe, conclusively that Teresa Horbach was bashed behind her own RAV4 with the door open, because her blood, and Sharika Haim proved that, was her blood had sprayed on the back of the door, right? So that's giving you an alternative scenario that doesn't quite gel with Stephen Avery attacking her. Because remember what Brendan Dassey said. Brendan Dassey never talked about any of this scenario. And if Teresa Horbach was bashed in the head with the so-called, as Jack 61 will say, blunt and bloody object that allegedly was found in the back of the RAV, A, where is it? And B, how do you account for the fact that that Brendan Dassey never mentions blood on the pillow heads, right? Come on. She's profusely bleeding. She's probably dead, being knocked out with such a heavy instrument. It points to a different scenario. The state did not want to go there.
I think you see, with Ryan, if he's if he's just saying these things about the insurance claim because it helps the state's narrative, because there's no explanation for why Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey smashed this car, so they want to keep that out of the narrative, I would describe it as the less nefarious answer, right? Like, he didn't do this because he's responsible for the crime. He did this because he's kind of been asked. If they ask about the light, Ryan, this is the story. I mean, that'd be the less nefarious of the two.
But Jeff, why wouldn't the investigators question Brendan Dassey how that blinker light got broken?
I think I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, nor do I. I mean, you would say, well, Brendan, did you and Uncle Stephen crash the vehicle or damage the vehicle in any way when you were hiding it? Which then begs the stupid question, if you broke the blinker light, why would you then pick it up and put it in the back of the victim's vehicle? Because remember what Kellie said, every time you enter into a murder scene, there's a good possibility you're going to leave your own DNA or forensic evidence there. So why on earth would Stephen or Brendan risk picking up the blinker light and hence leaving their DNA imprints and put it in the back of the vehicle? It makes no sense.
Yeah, another thing that makes no sense is they're in the middle of a junkyard, right? And if you look at some of the pictures of those cars, some of those cars in the back and the trunk had shit all over them. There was lots of stuff. Those cars were not clean in the back. So why would you keep the blinker with the car? That's something that you just wouldn't do. They would, if the killer would have thrown it to try and keep the scent off and reduce the possibility of it pointing back to you, they would dump it in any car in the whole yard, and you'd never be able to trace that back to the RAV, I don't think.
Well, it kind of goes to the same thumb of the rule, and that would be, why do you remove the license plate and then choose to dump them in it somewhere else on the salvage yard, but then, like you guys have just highlighted, go to the effort to pick up the broken fog light and then keep it with the car? It just, if you're doing it one way, why doesn't the same rule apply to the other piece of evidence that you could potentially leave behind?
It's a good point. And I think I'll just say what I think, because I mean, it's just my opinion, but if the light happened before the crime, then and you didn't do any testing on the light, then the defense has no reason to test the light. You see what I'm saying? But had that crime been involved, or had that been proved to be involved in the crime, the defense may or probably should have had the right to test that light. How does that sit with you guys?
It's just incomprehensible to me that fundamental fair, and Jack 61 and I talk about this all the time. You want your system of justice to have fundamental fairness, and you ask yourself, what, as a matter of fairness, why not test anything that you can, give it over, as long as Zellner's going to pay for it. Who cares? Test away. If your case is so rock solid, why not allow the testing? It's just a matter of fundamental fairness. Simple as that.
Vehicle. But the most important thing is the missing poster. Because when you put out a description of a car, and it was a detailed description, if it has any body damage, you put that on there, because that would have stood out above everything else if people were seeing a RAV driving around with that whole front parking light knocked out. So the parking light was not damaged before she was murdered. It is part of the events of the murder, and Mr. Hillegas connected himself to the parking light.
Jeff?
And that is a huge piece of evidence linking.
If you actually go back a little bit and show that blinker light in the back of the RAV, what you'll notice is a dark brown streak on, it's almost like a T on top of that blinker light, on the blinker light itself. I'll tell you right now, if you look at photographs of that blinker light, that brown mark is gone. That blinker light is very likely has been tampered with and cleaned. So if you have a look at pictures now of that blinker light, and there's some in case 02, you'll notice that that dark brown mark across that forms like a T, it's not there. It's gone.
The murder, and Mr. Hillegas connected himself to the parking light. And that is a huge piece of evidence linking him to the crime.
That's not correct. I did call her.
Sorry to offend everyone, but I'm very offended by having a client who's innocent and is now spending, has now spent 13 years locked up for something he didn't do. So all of our feelings are hurt. But I'm going at it wherever the Denny Road and the evidence takes me, that's where I'm going. And if people want to get off the train, give us a call. We're totally reasonable. But I have no explanations for all of these things on Ryan Hillegas.
So your attorney's got the brief all done, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for the regular appeal, right?
And that's for the Seventh Circuit.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
one in Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did they tell you how many pages it was?
No,
No.
no. I haven't talked to Laura, so. Oh, but she's good, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The process in the Seventh Circuit involves each side having an opportunity to file briefs in front of the court that spell out your argument in written form. And then the court will review those briefs and review the record of the proceedings that happened below in federal court and in state court. And then comes oral argument, at which point lawyers from both sides will go into a courtroom at the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago and have an opportunity to make their points out loud to a panel of judges who will ask questions of either side.
Brad Schimmel. Brad, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.
So you've got several areas, and just give our viewers some idea of like how much is prosecuting specific types of cases versus government affairs and so forth.
Well, we have about 100 lawyers who work in our Division of Legal Services. About 24 of them do criminal prosecutions for the DA's offices when they have a highly complex case or a case that's going to take tremendous resources. And they also do the criminal appeals for the DA's offices. And we have about 100 special agents with the Division of Criminal Investigation who handle complex cases.
So investigators, not just lawyers, as employees.
Right.
Okay.
We also have the 3 crime labs. So I have about 200 people that work in our crime labs in Madison, Wausau, and Milwaukee.
Jeff?
We also have our Solicitor General's Division that's working on.
Okay, so this is very, very important. But Brad Schimmel is acting like your number one politician here, right? Because he just gave a shopping list of his department and how massive his department is and how many resources are at his disposal. All those investigators, all those attorneys, and 3 crime labs. All of that versus Brendan Dassey. Who do you think's going to win, right? He's got the whole state's resources under his belt, and he just gave it as a shopping list. Someone like Brendan Dassey and his family have got no chance. No chance. Even his attorneys have got no chance against all those resources. We're talking about millions of dollars to keep that department running. Right, guys? Brendan Dassey's attorneys don't have that luxury. So they have to be very, very laser focused in what they do. So where is it that's a level playing field here, guys? Where's a level playing field?
Nowhere to be found.
So I have about 200 people that work in our crime labs in Madison, Wausau, and Milwaukee. We also have our Solicitor General's division that's working on defending our state's sovereignty relative to the federal government.
So is he basically saying that we run Wisconsin our way and anybody else can bugger off? Is that basically what that documentation is saying?
It kind of does seem that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. Overreaching by the federal government. This is Wisconsin, guys. We run the show our way.
Well, you have to wonder if Brendan isn't some collateral damage to that attitude of the feds should not be making decisions for us. Let's stay with the lower state court's decision, right? So you wonder if that doesn't play into it.
The case is set for oral argument on Valentine's Day, 2017. And that means that both sides will get to present their case in 20 minutes to a panel of judges of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. This is a federal court that is one step below the United States Supreme Court. It's a very important day, and that's why we are putting so much energy into preparing Laura for this case.
And little did Steve Drizzen know that for all practical purposes, this 3-judge panel that they're talking about is 2 steps below the Supreme Court, not just 1. Because they can convene an en banc panel, which they hardly ever do. If they don't like the answer they get, they can go for it again before they get to the Supreme Court. But so that is really one of Jack's and mine appropriate hot buttons. So anyway, just so we know, it would have been a total shock to him if you told him at this point, going through this, that there would be an en banc appeal. He would have said no chance of it.
What we're trying to do is to, as best as possible, replicate the experience that Laura's going to have when she steps up in front of the Seventh Circuit. One of our students is actually going to argue the case for the state. There will be a panel of judges that I have selected, leading law school faculty, some who have experience in this area, some who are fresh to this case. Because we won the federal district court, the state gets to go first. He'll get questioned by the judges because we want to make this as real as possible. So Laura can sort of pick up on the questions that the judge asks the state. Laura will then get 20 minutes, essentially defending the district court's decision in Brendan's case. This is a hugely important day for Brendan Dassey. When we won in federal court in front of Judge Duffin, that was about a 1 in 100 shot. Each step of the way you go into the court system, the higher and higher levels of appeal, the harder it is to win. And if we lose in the Seventh Circuit, it just makes our climb that much more difficult.
Jeff. I don't know if it's a little bit too early to even bring this up right now, considering we haven't even reached the part that my writer addresses the courts and argues, but I know it always comes up in the community in terms of why did
Okay, now this whole thing is flawed.
Why did Drizzen allow obviously Nye Ryder to take the stand and he just said it himself, this is such an important part, so why would you allow her to take this one? I've always thought that maybe with the confidence, like he just said, they won in the federal court with Duffin, that they probably assumed that they just had it in the bag. So why not give Nyrider this opportunity to really come forward and get her name towards this great opportunity to win an overturning of the Brendan Dassey case part of it. So yeah, I don't know if it's a bit too early to bring that up, but I know a lot of people at this point will be saying, why did she do this part? Why not Stephen? Thoughts?
I think it's a really common. Go ahead, Big Jeff.
Well, no, I don't know whether or not this will have been Laura Nyrider's first, first crack at a federal appeals court in a wrongful conviction case. But you always need your first, right? I mean, Stephen Drizzen is the sort of the head honcho, and he's got people that work for him, right? And you want to give those people a chance, and it's mentoring, and eventually you have to throw your you have to throw your junior members at important cases. So yeah, you might say that Brendan might have been better off with Drizzen, and you might be right. But let's recall that Laura Nyrider is going to win this 3-panel appeal. So yeah, okay, yeah. Why not Stephen Drizzen? Well, it didn't matter. Laura won this one, so she did well. Good for her.
Yeah, I agree, Big Jeff. And if I could just say just a couple of points. Laura Nyrider is no dummy, right? She's very, very academically able, very smart cookie, and knows exactly how to bring about her points. The mere fact that she had Steve Drizzen as a mentor, and the fact that they also had panel members of the where she worked, grilling her and doing mock trials, basically asking all the real tough questions. I think Laura Nyrider did a fantastic job. She presented well. There were a couple of curly questions, of course, but as Big Jeff said, she won, right? She won. So again, the issue is not with Laura Nyrider. The issue lays on the feet of Brad Schimmel, who was not prepared to accept the referee's decision. Not once, twice. And it goes to show that in the end, at the end of the day, guys, you have to ask yourself, hey, look, why bother going to Judge Duffin? Why bother going to a 3-panel member of the 7th Circuit Court if Brad Schimmel is going to contest every decision made? And it goes to show, guys, that when someone high of authority wants their answer, they'll keep on pursuing it till the end. So the question must be asked, why was Brad Schimmel personally involved? Is it because he happened to be a former bandmate of Mr. Kratz? So there was an association there, a long-term association, or did he want to prevent the wolves coming to his department? Because I tell you what, had Brendan walked, there would have been a lot of tough questions, or should have been a lot of tough questions asked about the Attorney General himself. Why he never accepted the umpire's decision twice. So to summarize, I believe Nyrider did a fantastic job. A female perspective, very passionate, to the point, and she handled the tough questions.
Brendan was the first case that I got assigned to as a law student, and it changed my life. When I got assigned to Brendan's case and watched those videos, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I had to help people like this. I now teach the same class that I took 10 years ago. It's kind of come full circle for me. You know, these aren't just names on a page. These aren't just legal arguments. These are real people with families and friends. They deserve justice and they deserve truth.
Brendan will not be in attendance at this argument. It's very unusual for defendants to be present. I think Brendan is, unsettled by this. I think he is cautiously optimistic that this will be one step closer to freedom. But he also realizes that there have been disappointments all along the way.
What has this kid been through from ages 16 to 26 now? Who prosecute you, or, a jury comes back with a not guilty verdict. Actually, there is no statute of limitations, come to think of it, for murder. So it's probably the not guilty verdict that is the only thing that's final here. It's something Brendan's going to live with for the rest of his life, like it or not.
Hi, this is Laura Nightwriter. I have a question. I am in the process of trying to e-file my oral argument card.
There will be a panel of 3 judges. We will not know that panel until the morning of the argument. So part of what we are doing is making sure that she understands the viewpoints of all 11 of the judges on the 7th Circuit, that she's read opinions by all of those judges on the areas that we are covering in argument, so that she can adapt her argument if need be, depending on who the panel is.
You notice what he said, what Steve Drizzen said. They don't know who they're going to get as a panel of 3 judges. So they've got to essentially work out a strategy for all of the judges, because it depends on, their viewpoint, what they think about criminal justice, et cetera, et cetera. So let me tell you now, the amount of work that they would have done would have been phenomenal. And if you've ever been in front of a panel, as I have when I did my honours thesis, and you were being marked and assessed by the entire staff, we're talking about 8 people. Everyone, let me tell you right now, everyone is different. Some people are very sympathetic. Other people are very brutal. You got to be able to handle all personalities. So I'll tell you right now, it would have been a nightmare for Laura Nightwriter, but kudos to her. She shone and she won. And my second point is, I love the way we saw that chronology of events that happened to Brendan, poor Brendan, and the major players that really fucked him over. His own attorney and Michael O'Kelly, which I'm sure Big Jeff will have a couple of words to say about him. But that was really well done.
Yeah, I said at the beginning of the episode and counted as my bold prediction that I was going to get steamed up, and boy, seeing O'Kelly really did that. So, just what they did to him. We could go on and on, but we're nearing the end, so maybe we can. I think probably the panel and the people in chat have heard enough about Mike O'Kelly. I'm going to ruin their night by talking about him.
I guess we were done anyway. Sorry about that. So that brings us to the end of the show today, the end of that episode 5, Big Jeff. We finished one, Dr. Silkman. So I will throw it over to you, Big Jeff. Give us your wrap-up comments for today. And we saw a lot, got through quite a bit, actually.
Well, we're exactly halfway through Ma'am 2, right? I mean, that's the end of episode 5. There's 5 more to go. Let's we're going to keep at it. It was really one of the enjoyable things about the Ma'am series is, even though it starts off as Kellie likes to say, with a bunch of different stories, really, the Stephen story and Brendan story are, very, very different. And the documentarians do a wonderful job of bouncing back and forth between the two. Just when you think you're at a very interesting point in one, they switch back to the other. Good authors do the same thing when you're reading the book, and it's really increases the entertainment value of the product. It was good to see Kathleen Zellner finish up her investigation. We saw a lot about Ryan Hillegas today. I know there's a lot of people in the community who have some very strong suspicions about Ryan, and you can see from today's episode exactly why they are founded. There are some questions, behaviors, that just simply do not have answers with regard to, some of the things that went on with them. And switching over to Brendan, I mean, we're moving through. We see, agree with Dr. Silkman, what a tremendous amount of work that it must have been to prepare for that 3-judge panel. I mean, she must have put in hundreds of hours, and that's a lot. To prepare for that, having to prepare for each individual judge, knowing what they're going to think, knowing what might resonate with them based on their opinions. Incredible amount of work. Obviously, Nyrider and Drizzen, people with high integrity. That's what they're doing there is above and beyond the call of any paycheck. You have to do what they're doing there, not because you're getting a paycheck for it, but because you feel a strong devotion to helping people with the expertise that you have. So yeah, that's kind of my take on what we saw today. Good to be at the end. It was good to hang around with some friends for an hour or so this evening. So on to the next.
Thanks a lot, Big Jeff. Really appreciate those comments. Dr. Silkman, we saw quite a few things. I know you're always excited when we finish an episode, so congratulations.
Yeah, I still can't believe it. But I just want to say, what a fantastic wrap-up by Big Jeff. I reckon we should do a special with all the wrap-ups in one video by Big Jeff. He's so passionate and doesn't muck around, and I really enjoyed that. Really, really fantastic sum up by Big Jeff. Yeah, I enjoyed the episode. I don't like any of the stuff that involves Brendan for obvious reasons, but it goes to show that Laura Nyrider, Steve Drizzen, and others put in the hard yakka, put in the hard yards. They did a great job, and congratulations to Laura for standing in front of a panel, and as we'll see, she eventually won. I'm really enjoying the series. I'm really enjoying discussing with the group at a fantastic panel, and can't wait for next week. Thank you very much, guys, and everyone in chat.
Thank you, Dr. Silkman. Appreciate those comments. And Kel, if you wouldn't do the honor and responsibility of leading us out of episode 23.
Yeah, we made it to the end. I think that's all I've got. My microphone's having a few issues and my reception's not very well, so I'm not going to go on. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, panel, and see you guys next time.
Well, thank you so much, Kellie. We always appreciate your insight, and it is invaluable to us, as is the other input from the other panel members. So for Dr. Silkman and Big Jeff, and for Kel, this is Jeff Jones saying this has been Discussing a Murderer.